Monster Hunter is a series that has thus far in the world of gaming been a victim of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It doesn't mean it hasn't had its fair share of successes, but it's largely avoided the spotlight in the West for the last 14 years since its introduction on the PlayStation 2 in 2004. To understand why this happened, we have to take a look at the series from the beginning. The concept is simple and each game starts in a relatively similar fashion. A village or community needs help because they're being harassed by giant monsters, and you assume the role of a monster hunter to accept the challenge of purging these beasts from the landscape. You pick a weapon, you pick a mission with a monster to kill as a target, you set out to introduce the monster to the pointy end of your weapon. There are no character skills, no player levels, no skill trees, and no convoluted systems to add the illusion of depth. Just you, whatever armor you manage to craft, and your oversized weapon ready to relieve a monster of its body parts. From there, the game only gets better as you learn that every move counts. Every dodge roll, every swing of your weapon, and every tail swipe, head nod, and foot stomp of the monster you're hunting has an impact. Dodging can bring you out of harm's way or straight into it. Swinging your weapon can deal damage or leave you open to be attacked yourself, and the monster movements are what allow you to read what it's doing next. Dark Souls adopted a very similar take on combat, and it's sort of the forefront of every gaming website, magazine, and forum. So why has Monster Hunter largely remained in the shadows for so long? As I stated before, Monster Hunter started on the PS2 in 2004, but as a new series and a heavily Japanese-inspired one at that, it gained a following but still sold less than 1 million units. The series then moved from the PS2 to the PSP, from the PSP to the Wii and 3DS, and even a version for the Wii U. There is also a version for the Nintendo Switch, but as that is still currently a Japanese exclusive, we won't really be discussing that here. These games were not failures by any means, despite living in a relatively unknown corner of the gaming market. It's one of the largest series in Japan, and across all the titles in the series to date has sold 40 million copies. These are not Grand Theft Auto 5 numbers, but still respectable in their own right. What is more impressive than sales, however, is the fact that by and large the series has maintained its integrity. The series, even graphically, has deviated very little from the original formula over the last 14 years. Some would argue that you don't fix what's not broken, and I think more than ever that's an appropriate way to view their stance on the series and how they handle sequels. As of 2018, sequels are in a weird place in the gaming community. What constitutes a sequel? Some sequels are torn apart by gamers for seeming to just be extensions of the original game, but by definition, is that not what a sequel is? A game with a good core experience should allow for sequels that don't need to revolutionize the gameplay to stand out. People continue to buy the newest edition of Call of Duty every year, and yet if you strip down the new setting, the shiny new graphics, it's more or less the same exact experience you got 10 years ago. It may have a toxic community, and may not be the most complex or tactical experience, but what it does well. Monster Hunter has, since birth, changed very little as well. There have been a few additional weapons added, a couple dozen new monsters, and new areas to explore, but at the end of the day the mechanics have stayed virtually the same. That has been what has kept the core players around for so long. They didn't need to add flashy new skills to keep players excited. They didn't need to muddy the progression with a level up system. It has been, and seems likely to stay, dependent on the player's skills and knowledge of their own mobility along with the monsters. Yes, many gamers owned a PS2, but as the series was new on that console, it hadn't gained the traction yet to generate a lot of buzz. The move to the PSP was not a bad idea for Capcom, as their fanbase in Japan largely seems to prefer mobile gaming. But again, a lesser known Japanese title on a handheld console, without the TV spot backing it like Pokemon, wasn't front page news then either. Then came the Wii, the Nintendo behemoth that grabbed the attention of nearly everyone, gamer or not. With a worldwide sales total of 102 million consoles, it was hard to find someone who didn't have a Wii laying around their house. This emerging market of family-oriented consoles seemed like the perfect opportunity for the exposure a series like Monster Hunter needed to make a breakthrough in the gaming world. And while the Wii entry, titled Monster Hunter Tri, was by no means a failure with around 2 million units sold, less than 1 million of those sales came from the West, and the very casual market of the Wii proved that it still wasn't ready for a series with a steep learning curve and sometimes punishing gameplay. The next leap to the 3DS wasn't terribly surprising given the successes the series had seen on the PSP. The games fit well in a portable setting, with local multiplayer being a main feature. This is where the series really seemed to find its footing. It was eagerly adopted on the 3DS with the release of Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, but lacked full online connectivity, and the lack of a second analog stick left some players feeling hindered by the sometimes clunky controls. Both of these issues were ironed out when the game was ported to the Wii U, but the abysmal sales of that console meant that even though it offered possibly the best Monster Hunter experience to date at that time, it still went largely unnoticed. This was followed by the release of Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate on the 3DS a few years later. This took the experience of Monster Hunter 3, added in new weapons, added verticality to the terrain, added new mechanic to mount the monsters you're hunting, and improved the series in just about every way. That, coupled with the new Nintendo 3DS, which had an albeit small second analog nub, made for what is thus far the best-selling entry into the series with 8.2 million units sold worldwide, nearly double what 3 had sold both between the Wii and the 3DS. This showed Capcom that they had a series that was willing to be adopted by the masses if only it was presented right. The base experience had always been there and had remained untouched through all the platform changes and improvements, but in the age of 4K TVs and teraflops of power, the game seemed dated and out of touch. Monster Hunter Generations entered the Western market in 2016 on the 3DS. It overall sold very well with a little over 6 million copies sold, and added some new abilities for hunters, but was still on a 5-year-old handheld console. Monster Hunter Double Cross was then announced for the Nintendo Switch in Japan, but at the point of writing this, there are still no plans to port it to the West. So what was the next step for the series? Do they continue the trend of the last few years and make it a series exclusive to handheld consoles? Was it going to remain on Nintendo consoles for this foreseeable future? No one knew, and with the next installment in the West likely being a localization of Monster Hunter Double Cross, it looked like things were going to continue in a similar fashion as they had been, until E3 2017. E3 2017 was full of great surprises across the board. God of War was getting a new game, Metroid Prime 4 was teased, a mainline Pokemon game for the Switch, Microsoft unveiled their Xbox One X capable of 4K gaming, and Capcom showed a trailer for a previously unknown Monster Hunter game that was set to release in early 2018 on PS4, Xbox, and PC. What? Behind the scenes, since the release of Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, a team at Capcom had been creating from the ground up a whole new Monster Hunter experience known as Monster Hunter World. It shocked everyone. Capcom knew it was going to shock everyone. The gameplay trailer started with a lone hunter wandering through a beautiful forest, picking plants, swinging from vine to vine, gathering gunk off of tree trunks, traversing what appeared to be a seamless, wide-open world with incredible visuals, modern physics, and advanced AI. No one was sure what to think, even after the hunter sneaks up on a school bus-sized dinosaur. It seemed so familiar and yet looked so different. Then the theme music cut in, and suddenly we realized Monster Hunter had come to the modern home console era when it was least expected, and when it was most vital. Not only that, but even with a jump to home consoles with an aim to attract millions of new players, they seem to have done so while maintaining the integrity of their game. The combat still feels challenging, yet satisfying. The in-depth crafting is intact. The charm and personality that drew players in from the start all seems to be there. What could have been a series locked away in its safety bubble has dared to break forth and make a name for itself in the world stage. Capcom and the Monster Hunter team truly proved themselves to be one of the few developers out there that seem to not only be self-aware, but aware of the desires of the players they make games for. They took that kind of cycle that can put games into the grave and broke away without sacrificing their product in the process. Now, how the game fares in this major Western market is yet to be determined. At this point, it's up in the air, but one thing is for certain, and that is that millions of fresh new eyes are aware of this series that had somehow scooted by under the radar for so long. There have been 2 open betas on the PlayStation 4 so far for Monster Hunter World, with a third one coming up from January 19th to the 22nd, right before the game's release on PS4 and Xbox One on January 26th. The game itself still has a lot to prove to this market as well, but from everything we have seen so far, I have no doubt in my mind it will capture the interest of millions of new gamers around the globe. I will personally be reviewing the game shortly after release to let you know how I feel it holds up in the grand scheme of the series, so remember to check back for that. If you liked this video, or if you hated this video, please leave some feedback in the comments. Let me know exactly what you thought. Thanks again for watching. I hope to see you all out in the hunt.